One batch. Two batch. Penny and dime. Oh! Shot me!
That was one of my other favorite things from it is like just all the moments in the show where he's like, yeah, come on, Red, you're gonna do it, yeah, man, you're right, you're gonna do it, yeah, you big man behind the gun, yeah, you're gonna do it, just do it, just pull that trigger, you put that right here, Red, you put that right
You just
here,
like mumble and
yeah, you just like have a gravelly voice as you can. You're gonna do it, Red. You're gonna put it right here.
right in between the eyes.
Right in between the eyes, Red. If you don't do that, that man dies and his blood is on your hands, Red.
Staring death in the freaking face. I have something to admit.
Yeah?
I'm in love with my car.
Oh, me and Chase.
Chase, me and my boy Chase.
I mean, I can't believe we actually sat through that whole video.
We watched 2 of those whole
I
videos.
know. It was, I don't know which one was
Slam
worse.
dunk!
The cobwebs.
Oh, God.
I don't know which one was worse, though. That's the thing.
Yeah, it was different levels of complexity. TLC is truly the learning channel.
Oh, is it really?
No.
Good.
Not at all.
I hope not.
I mean, I learned a little bit of something about the world today.
That there's no hope?
Yeah, everything, it's all lost.
Dude, what's next? I just...
I'll tell you what's next. The Punisher and Daredevil.
Oh, you betcha.
You bet your bottom dollar.
You bet you're right. If you don't put that bullet right here, it's going to be them. Just like, you're a lunatic, Frank. Yeah, well, I'm a lunatic. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm a lunatic. Yeah.
Oh, is that right? Is that right? I'm a lunatic.
Yeah. Because this is what you know about justice.
I love how we both keep taking a drink at the same time.
It doesn't work when there's only 2 of us.
Yeah.
My voice just changed all of a sudden. Holy cow. I've got a bubble in my throat from all the John Bernthal impressions.
So we have a confession to make. We're recording this on the same day.
No, you're not supposed to say that.
I already said it.
Dang it.
So we don't have
I'll just
any.
cut
We
it
don't
out.
have any intro stuff.
There ain't no intro.
So yeah, we can just jump into it. Jump
Bro,
right into it.
We talking about the Punisher today, and let
Daredevil.
me tell you, and Daredevil.
You got the Punisher
Season
hat. You
2.
got the Punisher shirt.
I was gonna wear
you
my
had
Punisher,
the Punisher
hoodie.
mug before too.
I did. I have the Punisher coaster right next to
Yeah.
me. So, folks,
coaster.
you gonna know.
It's all
I'm a
decked out in the
fan.
Punisher.
I'm a Punisher fan,
Punisher
and
fan
I'm not the like
through.
country boy Punisher fan where I'm like, ooh, skulls are edgy, dog. I'm gonna put a skull sticker on my truck. I'm gonna get those fake plastic testicles that hang down from the back too.
My car's got those.
So when people look at them, they say that's a man. Because that's what I see when I see a guy.
Sounds like a Ford truck commercial.
Doesn't it? Now listen here, Joe American. You gonna need yourself a Punisher skull sticker and plastic testicles.
This is peak male physique. If you don't like it, you can get out.
You can get my other vitamins to get rid of that liberal SJW crap out of your system. Because everybody knows. Oh, yeah, Alex. I'm crazy. I'm like Alex. Yeah. It's like,
So the Punisher is Alex Jones, is what you're telling me.
I'm saying the Punisher's after Alex Jones.
Oh, gosh.
People like Frank Castle running
That'd be
around.
hilarious if that was the next season.
Just like a guy pinned up to be Alex Jones as the villain.
He's running like some creepy like prostitution ring or something, and Frank has to take him down.
No, it'd be something less serious. It'd be something like he's the one dumping the chemicals in the water that's turning all the frogs, you know.
He's the one doing it.
He's the one
snap.
doing
So
it.
the Punisher has to stop it.
So the Punisher has to stop it.
I see where that goes. I see it.
I'm trying to save the frogs.
Wasn't there actually was in the Punisher season 1 when they were doing the flashbacks to the army scenes or whatever, there was a guy watching like Alex Jones. One of the army's guys was
there
watching.
actually?
I don't know if it was actually Alex Jones, but it was like the same kind of like hyper patriotic,
interesting,
conspiratorial kind of
funny.
guy. It was. I thought that was interesting.
I like it.
So
That's
there was a little
hilarious.
shout out to that. Yeah.
So anyway, we're talking Punisher season 1 today, the Netflix series. We probably make some mention to the movies. We talked a little bit.
Mixed in a little bit of Daredevil and stuff too.
Yeah, I talked a little bit about the comic in from
last week's episode.
Welcome back, Frank. Welcome back, Frank.
Welcome back, Rank.
Welcome back, Frank.
Ranky.
Bill Cosby, I'm the Punisher now.
That was last week's episode.
What you gonna do, Frank? You're gonna come after me? Yeah,
Ooh, that'd be a good episode. Frank comes after Bill Cosby. Brill Crosby.
I'm coming for you, Bill. Bill, I'm gonna put blood right between your eyes.
What if they made an episode of or a season of Punisher where he literally just goes after like
Hollywood?
Oh gosh, that would stoke the flames. Netflix basically just severs all ties with Hollywood.
I know.
In that moment.
I know, right? Oh gosh.
Oh gosh. So yeah, what are your thoughts on the Punisher TV show specifically?
Yeah. Let me preface my fandom of the Punisher because so I made I don't like explaining jokes, but I think it's important that I address one of the elephants in the room, that the Punisher skull is iconic in a lot of ways, and I think people wear it as a logo and solely a logo. They do
wear it as a logo.
Like more than just, I love the character and I love Frank Castle and I love the Punisher narrative and I love all this
I
stuff.
feel like some people wear it as a representation of
certain ideals,
the revenge fantasy that the Punisher can portray, versus just wearing it as like a fan of the medium itself, not necessarily as a representation of agreeing with the violence. Frank
exactly.
uses, so.
Yeah. So, well, and also just too, like, there is, and not saying it as a judgment to anybody who does this, but more just that there are those people where they know nothing about the actual source material. They just like how something looks, and then they take it on as their own, and it's like, I have a Punisher skull on my Ford and plastic bull testicles and things like that. And so I am not one of those people. I've always been a Punisher fan. I watched the Thomas Jane Punisher movie, the early 2004 movie. Probably was when I was in like late middle school. It was like 8th grade or freshman year, I want to say. I'd always liked the skull, but like I obviously like didn't know anything about the Punisher, didn't have a lot of access, so it just kind of was like, I always kind of was like, I really want to check out that character at some point. And then I got the movie, and I watched the movie, and I was like, that was so freaking cool. And speaking specifically to the progression from the Thomas Jane movie and that starting my fandom to now, it's only grown as I've understood Frank Castle's character and the whole thing behind it. Because like he is a revenge narrative kind of character. There's definitely more complexity, and we're going to dive into that. But I think sheerly from the standpoint of him being the product of tragedy is very interesting. Like if you think about it, it's almost like a Shakespearean Hamlet style thing where there's this evil person who's killed everything he loves and now is like, what do I do with myself? And he's like, I'm going to hunt down people who did this and I'm going to make them pay. And so I think that original concept in the Thomas Jane movie really got me excited about the character of like, I don't agree with what he's doing. I don't like how he's doing it. It's brutal. It's violent. It's just there's no redemption. There's not the classic superhero redemption, but it makes for a fascinating individual to watch and to study. Yeah. Just a psyche. And it was actually Todd McFarlane about Spawn who said this, but I think it applies to the Punisher too, McFarlane wrote Spawn as like, what would I do in some of these situations if like I knew, like, if there was someone who stole my daughter and like abused her, like did this, or, was taking children and abusing them or doing all these things. He's like, what would I do if I had unbridled powers at my disposal? What would I do? And he's like, I would be an animal. Like I would not hold back because I would have the ability to reap unceasing judgment on them. So I think with Punisher, that's always been kind of an interesting aspect to me is what is the result of someone internally who feels that their justice is the be-all end-all justice, and then also like what does that say of the world around them, that that's the only hope that they see is this person needs to be gone for good because they will not change. And so anyway, so that has kind of spawned and evolved to the modern day where now we have like more Punisher stuff. We had his appearance really in the first major thing for a good while since Warzone, I think.
2009, I think.
Yeah.
So almost 10 years.
Which was also a very terrible movie. it's corny.
I mean,
it's kind
I think
of
it's
fun.
a good Punisher film. I think
in terms of the depth
it's
of
corny,
the character,
yeah.
it's
No.
not. Yeah, it's just kind of like a bloody action movie.
Yeah. It's literally a war zone.
Literally, with paper mache skulls and people
And
getting
punching a dude through his skull to the back of his head.
Yeah.
Nah, it's not possible.
Yeah. Apparently there's like raspberry jam in there. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it was that was kind of like the last hurrah of any Punisher thing, and then it wasn't until season 2 of Daredevil where the Punisher comes in and kind of plays a side role, and now we have season 1 of the Punisher Netflix series. I loved it. The only reason I literally sat down and powered through Daredevil was to get to season 2 so I could see the Punisher come in, and it was so worth it. John Bernthal plays hands down like the best Punisher ever. Like just even just his mannerisms, his relatability, the human side comes out of him, but then there's also the aggressive animalistic side that is just so raw and just bubbles up. They directed him perfectly, and just some of the mannerisms he had of like when there's an intense situation bubbling up and then he's like,
you could just see the
he
rage,
like slams
bubbling
something,
up
or
in him,
he's 2 seconds away from like destroying a whole bunch of stuff, but he's trying to restrain. And so he's just a very complicated guy, and I loved his portrayal, and I loved Bernthal as an actor doing it. I just can't. It's like one of those, like, I've seen it, and so I just can't imagine.
It's kind of like all
else.
of the Marvel characters. Like,
exactly.
You can't see anybody else doing Captain anymore, or Thor, Iron Man. Like, Bernthal made that. Like, he's
at least with
Punisher
this
now.
run. Like, you know, obviously if they redo it or put it in some different setting or whatever, like, different story. But for this specific goal, like, man, he has just done an amazing job. But yeah, I don't really know. Well, first, this point forward, this is at about 12 minutes in. Major spoilers for Daredevil season 1 and season 2, Punisher season 1, and I think that's the extent of it.
Probably because there's nothing else.
Stay in those realms. So if for whatever reason you haven't finished them, and you don't want anything spoiled, you need to go finish them and watch them because they're great. But if you are interested in just hanging out to the conversation, just letting you know that there will be plot spoilers and just like a deeper dive discussion into the characters and those seasons and stuff like that. So I think to start out, so for you, Phil, because you really liked Daredevil, like even before
I think
the Netflix show, and then like the Netflix show kind of like exploded.
Yeah, I think. Well, it's interesting because I think I like the Punisher more because of the Tom Jane movie, and I think we had the game for the PS2 or something.
I'm looking into buying it at some point because I was like,
I remember it being really fun, but it was just so hard at the time, and we couldn't get past certain parts. But I just remember it being really fun. So me and my brother grew up like loving the Punisher, but we never really read comics or anything. And then there was the Ben Affleck Daredevil movie, which at the time, again, I thought it was a good movie, and it kind of like made me like the Daredevil a little bit more. And I think for me, the reason I like Daredevil is because of like the moral ambiguity he deals with, and like his Catholicism balanced with like his sense of duty and using his powers for like the good of humanity. And it's kind of interesting because like his powers make him so he can hear better. And in the show, I think they show this a lot better in that like he literally has to fight because like all he can hear now is like the screaming, like the city basically dying at like, and he's doing nothing about it. And so like him going out and fighting crime is basically just like, and it's similar to the Punisher in the sense like this is literally what he has to do. He has to go out. It's like fighting crime is like an extension of his body almost. And so like I like that aspect of him because it becomes his existence to fight crime, and then he deals with the tension of like his Catholic guilt and his beating dudes up every night for like the sake of quote unquote fighting crime.
When even his occupation being in
and he's a lawyer
law,
and he's literally doing the opposite of what
right.
he should be doing, and he's just taking law into his own hands versus like arbitrating,
right? Sort
of. And so it's an interesting dichotomy between those different identities that he portrays, which I think adding the Punisher on in season 2 to Daredevil was fantastic because there's such similar characters in their like pent up aggression and sense of like duty towards something. but how they manifest that is differently. And I thought it was very fascinating. So
Yeah.
I think the TV shows portrayed the Daredevil character very well.
Yeah.
And Punisher especially too. So.
Yeah. So since we're on it, because I do want to talk a little bit of film and like narrative quality and just like some cinematic stuff of just discussing the show. But no, specifically in regards to the premise and just how the characters are orchestrated and written, I thought season 2 of Daredevil, I mean, people are going to blast this, whatever, screw off. It was awesome. Like hands down way better than season 1 in my opinion.
Isn't that like, don't people think that most of the
people think season 2 was worse?
I mean, it's kind of hard because I feel like they were both like
they're both
there.
really good.
I think season 2 had some better fight scenes, and I think the characterization was more fleshed out.
I think for me, what it was is season 2 actually started wrestling more. I feel like it opened the door to this really interesting, difficult topic of like what is justice and what is the right way to handle something that seems out of your hands.
Yep.
And what is your duty? What is your goal? What if those things are both inside of you and they conflict? How do you deal with that? Then it takes that and it evolves it to this really extreme level where you have Murdock wrestling not only with Elektra coming in and that aspect, and then some of the other side plots, but also then you have the Punisher who comes in, and man, dude, like I think what epitomizes that, like the genius of that whole season is it's actually taken from Welcome Back, Frank, the comic, but it's the scene where Matt tracks down Frank Castle and finds him on the roof, and they kind of get into a little fist fight or whatever, and he has him chained to this like pillar thing. He's trying, Punisher's about to snipe some guy, some drug dealer, some drug lord or whatever. And they have that exchange of who's morally right. And Frank literally duct tapes a pistol with one bullet to Daredevil's hand. And he's like, if you really believe that that your system works, then you're going to have to kill me because I'm not going to stop. And I'm not going to allow you any chance to make me stop. And then just the back and forth they have about, Daredevil not thinking he's the same. Sorry, I should just pick a name. I'm like Matt Murdock and blah. But yeah, Daredevil being in that, like you said, that impasse of, is it right for me as a lawyer, a Catholic lawyer in a city trying to change it for the good, to be going around beating people's faces in? But I'm also not as bad as Frank Castle, aka the Punisher, who's literally gunning down mobs, doing all this crazy stuff. But then also, like, I am the same as him because I'm doing something that's outside of the system. But who gets to decide whose step outside of the system is too far? So like me as Daredevil beating people up and taking them to jail, is that as bad as Frank Castle, who's putting him in the ground for good?
Is it solving the problem?
Exactly. And then that being Frank's whole logic, and that they just grabbed hold of that tight, which I'm so thankful that they dive deep into that idea between those two, because it could have been really easy for them to make Daredevil like the grandstander of, well, you just kill and kill. That's what you're all about. And him just being like, yeah, I don't kill.
Yeah. I mean, there are some scenes in there where Daredevil like almost snaps and stuff. And I just like,
which makes it so human. It's so
and every
good.
time I think about that season, I just imagine that the fight scene in the stairwell where Daredevil is just like hammering dudes, and like he's almost getting it handed to himself, and he's kind of like, it's basically
stumbling through
his struggle against this thing, and it's
yeah. And so I think what sets season 2 so far apart for me personally above season 1 is the narrative genius to have those two characters bumping up against each other constantly.
Yep.
And
I mean, it kind of reminds me of Infinity War, because like the pairings were so well done in that movie. I feel like the Daredevil and the Punisher are like two of the characters that fit very well together because they don't.
Exactly.
Like they're basically the same person, but like their ideologies are so far apart from each other that they can't see like the similarities between themselves.
Right.
Well, the Punisher can, but Daredevil like refuses to admit it. So
right. But then also that they both are so convinced in their own camp that there's no way that they're going to step out into the other person's side.
Yep.
Like Frank Castle isn't going to be convinced to step into, good vigilantism and just taking him in and booking him by the cops. And he's like, nope, I've seen what happens.
I have nothing left to live for.
He's like,
I'm going to kill everybody
exactly.
who made me feel things.
Yeah, right? And so gosh, man, it just even thinking about it makes me want to watch season 2 again because it was just...
I think it set up the character of the Punisher really well.
Yes.
And it kind of, like, in my opinion, it got the classic Punisher tale out of the way. Like, oh, his family got killed and he went on a rage against the mob and now he got basically imprisoned for it. Like, he got his comeuppance or whatever. And so, like, they kind of got that out of the way so they could reset the stage. Like, oh, now he's rehabilitated. Now he's out. And now he's just trying to live a normal life. And then somebody has to come in and screw up his life again. And it's kind of like, I like how they took that as a launching point to, like, reinvigorate the Punisher story.
Definitely.
So.
Yeah, and because I think that's one of the things that they could have gotten very wrong is focusing on his family or trying to build the emotional connection by having a whole bunch of stuff with the family in it. But instead, I loved how they focused on Castle's reaction to the modern day that he lived in and how he had to move forward without them and what the memories did to him pointing back. So maybe jumping into season 1 of The Punisher from season 2 of Daredevil. Yeah, I just thought it was awesome. I do actually have some pretty, I don't want to say significant gripes, but they're like very specific towards the writing and things like that. One of them being that there was just way too much going on in the season. Personally thinking, like,
I think they could have scrapped the whole what's her name, Madani.
See, I think that one was really important because I think that served as...
Well, the reason I say that is because, like, she was researching this thing that she already, like, we as viewers already knew the outcome, so the whole point, like, her whole research, it was just pointless because, like, we already know that Frank and this guy were, like, in on it, and so, like, her researching it was almost, like, all pointless.
Wasted time.
Because, like,
yeah,
why
that makes sense.
And I think as a character, she was helpful in driving it forward and, like, building those relationships. But at the same time, like, her whole point was to research this thing that we already knew the outcome. So it's like, why even?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that was wasted time. I think the other thing that was wasted time, in my opinion, because granted, I say these things knowing that they also were used to, as like narrative devices later to be catalyst. But gosh, the Lewis.
Oh, okay, yeah, never mind.
Narrative line was just,
I think
unnecessary. Like, let me be very specific. Narratively, it felt very unnecessary.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that whole narrative, if there was anything in the show that felt borderline soapboxy commentary, it was that whole sequence of...
Yeah, I think the problem is that, like, the show was trying to make a statement about, like, PTSD almost. But I think, like, Frank's character himself did that well enough.
Right.
That shoehorning in Lewis as well, becoming a terrorist or something, like, I mean, it's probably a realistic case. I'm not gonna, like, deny that could happen, but at the same time, like, for Punisher's story, it doesn't make sense. And I think what they were trying to do was establish that the Punisher was basically just another terrorist, almost. Like, it was kind of like the Daredevil Punisher thing, like, here's the Daredevil over here to the left, then the Punisher's a little bit further right to him, and then there's even people who want to take it even further and kill innocent people in the name of their ideology, and we deem them terrorists or whatever. And so this guy was like, no, you're the same as me, like, we're fighting for the same team, we're fighting for this. So I think in that aspect it was helpful, but I think it came off too soapboxy.
Yeah, and to put some, for anyone who hasn't watched the show, this is just kind of, and who is still listening, this is just kind of the character Lewis is a young veteran who, I mean, he's got to be like early 20s, I think is how they portray him.
I think he was like 23.
Yeah, he's like really young, struggling really severely with PTSD. They, are very clear on like how severe the repercussions are mentally for him. And like, it's very serious. Like, it was a very like, wow, this is really intense. And like, I think it shines a good light on what that could be like. I think the reason I didn't like it is because with that express goal of using someone as a foil, like he was not a very deep character.
No.
And I think that was the problem, is it's like he didn't have anything to do with Frank Castle. He didn't have anything to do. He was just a random kid who was just kind of written into the story to eventually play a side comparison to Frank Castle.
Yeah.
Whereas I think why I didn't like that is you have 3 or 4 other people around Frank that, clearly are not with him on stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it was Micro, right? I'm just going to call him
Micro, yeah.
Like Micro, his whole thing was like, no, stop killing. Like, you're nuts. And he's like, no, like we're going to do it my way or I'm leaving. And he's like, you're nuts, you know? So there's so many voices speaking in saying like, what you're doing is wrong. That
even like Karen.
Yeah, you have Karen who says that. Like Madani, if you really wanted to have someone even like quote unquote in a system, like trying to do the just thing, you know, maybe she like knew all the details and all that stuff, you know, kind of goes through, and then you bring that, and then she becomes when she has a standoff with Castle, that it becomes like, well, you know, you gotta trust us and arrest these people and give us names. And he's like, no, that's not gonna work. And like, you could have done the same thing without the whole.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think it was shoehorned in for the sake of like making a statement about something, when like the statement in all respects were being made elsewhere. Like the PTSD was being made elsewhere through Frank's story itself. I mean, Frank, like the way they portrayed Frank in this show was clear. Like what he's doing is not correct, and so many people, like you said, were calling him out on it, that I think I agree that the Lewis thing was just like, why? Yeah,
well, I mean, you could have even used him as because I do think it was really, I think it was cool to see. Like, I loved Carter, is that his name?
The guy with the limp.
Yeah,
I liked his character.
Yeah, I really liked Carter. Like, Carter was like an awesome figure just in the show as a whole, and I liked the idea of having him and his group and still being connected to Frank and knowing he's alive and stuff like that. Like, I feel like you could have had if you really wanted to shine, if the whole purpose was to shine a light on the trauma that veterans deal with, that you could have done that without having the whole like to the extreme psychopath levels of I'm gonna blow up this thing.
Yeah.
Like I mean, there were some really intense scenes, like when Lewis is in his bedroom and stuff like that, and he's going to kill himself. And it's intense. And I think that itself speaks a very loud message that you don't like. So when you ramp it up to this point where like, now he's become this other vigilante and he's like killing innocent people and he's doing all this stuff. It's like, not denying anything could happen, God forbid, but at the same time,
it's almost a little dramatic.
Yeah. It's like, it's over dramatic. It's like you don't need that. And if anything, it might have been interesting at the end of the show when Frank is actually in the group and talking to people and sharing his story, that he's talking to this kid saying like, you need to find a better outlet. Like you need help. Like,
don't take my path.
Don't don't do what and that to me would have been way more powerful than just like this kid who I hated him too. Like,
yeah, I mean, I think we were meant to, but
yeah, it just,
I remember texting my brother. I'm like, dude, this Lewis guy's nuts. What the heck is going on?
And it wasn't even like a relatable nuts like some of the other characters.
I can't even relate to this character.
Yeah, it's like, I don't like him. I don't feel bad for him. Like, and that's the whole point, is we're supposed to feel bad for him. We're supposed to feel, wow, this kid's had a really tragic life and he's dealing with some very serious stuff. But you have this, this like fake veteran, beer guzzling guy who's filling him full of crap, and it just was like, that whole thing I was not a fan.
I mean, even if they would have just done it like one episode, like one narrative arc or something, it's like, okay, that makes the point. But they drug it on for 3 or 4 episodes.
It's like 3 or 4 episodes, and that's
like
at
half
the end,
season.
Right? And that's at the end too. That's not to mention all the times he was referenced before. So that to me adds into the bigger issue of like, I feel like they didn't pay enough attention to the really interesting stuff, and that kind of frustrated me.
Yeah.
Like, one of the best moments in the show, in my opinion, there's a couple. I think from a like personable standpoint that was really impactful was the episode where Micro's wife, who, he and his family, they all think he's dead, blah, blah, blah. They're living their life. He's just making sure they're safe. He's trying to get back to them. And she kisses Frank, and then Frank comes back and he finds him and he's like drunk, and and they have this like thing where Frank is like dead cold sober, and David is just like, he's drinking, he's saying stuff, and he's like, Frank, I'm hung like a moose. It's just like some of the, the stuff he's saying, and he's like, and he like pulls his pants down, and then Frank just be like, what are you doing? What is this?
It's funny to watch because like Frank's a very emotionless person, but in a weird way, he like in those moments he bonded like, with Micro
exactly
on like some sort of level. So
yeah, and it's because it's like almost like extremes speak to him, and so he's got this drunk buddy that he's made hanging out in this bunker that he's like he's plastered and he's like taking his pants off and he's just laughing at him, and it's just like, oh my gosh, like what do you do? And like to me that just was such a great progression because it was heartfelt, because like the whole episode David's been trying to get back to his family and he's really struggling with like, what do I do? You can see how devastated his family is, you see how lonely his wife is, you see how lonely really Frank is. You can see that he's really trying, like he misses this too of like, this would have been my family, I would have been helping my wife and my kids with stuff and doing this, like, and then David's devastation that he's trying to protect his family, but then in doing so he also having Frank help created this drama that popped up and now is eating him alive of like, I just watched my wife, who thinks I'm dead, which I'm not, kiss this other guy because she thinks I'm dead, so she thinks that's okay. It's like, oh my god, it was just complex but humorous but personal, but like it fits so well. And I feel like there weren't enough moments like that where they really grasped onto emotions that other characters were sharing. Like I some of my favorite moments throughout the entire show were Frank and Sarah being in the house and like her asking about like the kids and like, what do I do? And stuff like that. Like, I think there was one of the times where, she's like asking about the son and like, what would you do? And he's like,
well, and I think in those instances like that, and my personal favorite moments were when he was with Micro and they were just like talking and goofing off. And I think that has in common with the house scenes where like it's forcing Frank to confront like his human self, his emotional self.
Definitely.
Like you're basically like in the house scenes, you're seeing the father Frank, you're seeing the husband Frank in some senses, and like it's a completely different person in some senses than like the insane dude who's gouging people's eyes out and throwing their face through mirrors and all this stuff. Like it's just crazy. Like he can just be a normal dude walking in a house talking to someone's kid about how he shouldn't be violent and stuff. I'm like, this is,
and he's like throwing a football with him. And,
yeah, he's like throwing a football and he's like fixing things in the garage, and it's like, it's almost like Frank is this two-faced figure of like, he can turn it off and he can turn it on, which is, I think, interesting. Like he can somehow, like he bottles up the rage enough that he can just be a normal person somehow.
Well, and that was what I loved so much about how they portrayed him, is that he doesn't, like, he is so clear on what he will and will not do and who he will and will not put a bullet in, and that they like play it up to the extreme, and they play it up to the point where it's like, you want Rollins to get his eyes gouged out. You're like, you're a douche. Like, you're terrible. You've been lying. You've been killing people across the way. Now you're in this power fantasy because you have this one guy that you think is just ruining your life. You suck. Like, you're getting what you deserve. Yeah. And but then it's also, as the viewer, it's like the moral dilemma. It's like, but do I want his eyes gouged out? But then it's also like, but he was ready to do some stuff to Frank. And it's like, so it was all that stuff. And then just how viscerally violent Frank was in those moments with those specific people. I mean, sometimes more where it was like,
dude, Frank is gonna tear you to shreds.
I know, it's like, bad move,
like,
bro.
I know Frank's gonna get out of this somehow, and I know he's gonna wreck you.
Yeah,
it ain't gonna be good.
Yeah,
I was surprised when Billy clipped the thing. I was like, wow, he's having, like, Frank's not gonna give you your forgiveness, like, right? So
yeah, I thought that was interesting, but yeah, so just to kind of keep on that point, like, excuse me, there were some points where I just felt like there was just time, like. The last couple episodes, I ended up just like skipping through stuff because I felt, it was just long. It was like, this doesn't, as Netflix, like, yes, you absolutely should use the fact that you can just make stuff as long or as short as you need to and do that. But that doesn't mean just keep everything in an episode. And there were way, 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 way too many times where I just, why are they still talking about this? Like, why is this going on? This isn't adding anything to the story. This isn't backstory. This isn't character development. This isn't even a personal struggle. I mean, even the first episode where nothing happens, it's just Frank going to work, busting holes and stuff, doing all these things. That one was more interesting to me than some of the episodes later that were supposed to be quote unquote important to the plot.
Yeah.
That it just felt like they just dragged down forever because it was one person telling another person, you shouldn't be doing this, and the other person saying, but I'm doing what's right. And it just felt like that was rinsed and repeated 15 different times to the point where I just skipped ahead and just ran with it. But I don't know where to go next. I had a thought. So since we're kind of on the violence train and stuff with it, so obviously like Punisher is the epitome of revenge narratives ever. Mm-hmm. But how did you feel like the show? I mean, I already kind of anticipate what you're gonna say, but how did you feel like the show handled the idea of such extreme means to such quote unquote like really evil people?
I think like as we're talking about this, it's interesting seeing how, because I think the show makes it pretty clear if you're reading into it enough that like nobody but Frank believes what he's doing is correct. Like I think Frank is the only one that believes what he's doing is the right thing. And I think it's interesting looking at the narrative from the perspective of Frank, because like you have the bad guys like Billy, who's like his best friend. He was one of his like he was in the Marines, right?
Yep.
Marine buddies, and like they were involved in a lot of crap together, and so they had that bond. And like it took a lot for Frank to finally realize that Billy was not on his side anymore. I don't think he realized it until like that moment, basically. The
merry-go-round thing.
Yeah. And
which
so,
also, sorry, that was one of the other things, just kind of poking at some of the narrative stuff. They did not spend enough time showing how deep a connection. Not only, like, I got it in the beginning that Frank and Billy had the connection, but I think it would have made that final firefight at the end more impactful if we would have known how deep his family knew him. And that just seemed kind of shoehorned into me at the end like, if you take that clip and you put it at the beginning in, like, some of his nightmares or something like that, or, like, you know, when he sees Billy again, or he's, like, talking about, like, man, I remember this and all this stuff. Very different effect. And so I think at the end and not seeing all that stuff, it's like, yeah, I get that Billy and Frank are close, but I didn't know throughout the entire show. He says like, oh, you were like family, but you know, like his kids called him uncle. Like it was, you know, they used to jab at him. Like it was like a tight knit thing.
I don't think they played that up enough.
No. And and again, to me, that's one of those things where it's like, I don't know why you had that whole Lewis timeline and why you had all that stuff with Madani that was just added information that we as the viewer already knew, when you could have been spending a ton of time playing up Billy and Frank's relationship.
Yeah, there was even like the Madani Billy thing, like there was a lot of interconnected relationships that didn't really add.
It was just drama.
It didn't really add to.
Yeah, it didn't do anything.
Because Frank is the main character,
right? And
like obviously Billy is the bad guy, so you want to establish his character and stuff. But I don't know. I think going back to the violence thing, I feel like with Billy and what was the guy's name? The bald dude?
Rollins. Something Rollins.
I think they did a really good job of like setting them up as like dudes who deserved what they got.
Yeah.
And at the same time reinforcing the fact that what Frank is doing is not right. And I think that all comes to the point of like Frank is effective in eliminating these bad guys, but like when you get to the show and he's still as hyper violent as he has ever been, he's tearing the dude's eyes out and running Billy's face through the mirror or whatever, and like there's just blood everywhere, and like it's kind of like it's never gonna end. Like,
yeah,
I think it's almost sending this message of like, and I don't want to say this is what the show is trying to say, but I think what I read into the Punisher character is that like the level of violence he's using is effective in accomplishing killing a bunch of dudes.
Yeah.
But it's not effective in actually stopping crime. It's not effective in actually ending Frank's tirade on like the evil in the world, because I think like it's just there's just going to always be more people to kill. And so like, and I mean, that's not to say that Daredevil's way is any better. It's almost like vigilantes aren't really effective in general because like it's the classic Batman dilemma of like, do Batman's villains only exist because Batman exists? Like, did Batman create the culture necessary to create hypervillains and supervillains? And so it's a similar thing of like, if Frank just keeps ramping up his violence and ramping it up, like he's just going to create people who are trying to do the opposite of him and like stop him. And it's kind of like this thing of like violence isn't actually effective in like fixing things.
Yeah,
it's
or
just,
making the change internally in someone.
Yeah, it's not changing like the internal. Right. Like the reason people are violent is because of internal things usually, not because just
they are
externally. And so he's just chopping off the limbs rather than fixing like the heart issue. And I mean, that's not why people watch The Punisher. They don't want to watch The Punisher being a therapist walking around like, it's all right, buddy. It's all right. Things are going to be okay.
Tell me about your relationship with your father.
Yeah. But no. I think it's evident in the end, like Frank's world is going to continue crumbling around him. And I mean, that's the reason we watch it partially. Like, it's like you said, it's a tragic character. Like, he is basically anger embodied in himself. And like, he makes it evident that he will not stop. Like when he's talking to the Daredevil, like, you're going to have to shoot me to get me to stop. Like, that's the only way I will stop. And like, there's so many scenes in season 1 of Punisher where it's just evident, like, he is set down this path. And this is what he believes he needs to do, whether he's right or wrong. So, but I think it's evident that like it's not working in some aspects because like the war, like there's just more people to kill all the time.
Right.
And like now Billy, I bet in season 2 is going to be the next bad guy who's kind of like, all of a sudden he becomes a hyper villain because he sees Frank as a threat. And now it's like, now Frank is just going to start, because of the way he is, creating people who are trying to counteract his vigilantism. And it's like, now it's just going to be a cycle of hyper violence.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's the interesting question in regards to the violence portrayed as like, one, it's fiction, it's a show, it's not real. I mean, because I do remember like tragically the premiere or the trailer or something was going to come out.
They were going to drop it the day that the Vegas shooting happened. And they were like, let's hold it off a little bit.
I mean, it's like, having watched it, like I do understand.
Oh, and when I watched it, I was like, frig, this is...
It's like, that was a good call. Because I know people were like, oh, liberal media trying to push all this gun stuff. It's like, I get that, and I think there is a healthy dose of...
But they still made the show. It's not like they dropped
I think if
the
they
show,
scrapped it, that's a different story. But like, people, you have to understand, like, there's a lot of stuff that happens in that show. Yeah. Like, not just like gun violence, but like, there's people getting their eyes gouged out and people getting stabbed in the face, and like, like, it's an intense bit. And so if you're just gonna be like, bunk to what other people feel, like, whatever. Whatever with you. But I agree. I think specifically about like the actual aggression manifested part of Frank. Now that you put it that way, I like, that's one of the reasons I'm drawn to him though, is because I know, like, I've always struggled as being a person who's like gets really angry and like has an issue like going from like 0 to 100. But I also know that I'm equally about like, I'm not gonna get blisteringly angry to the point of revenge or whatever, but also knowing like, man, there's this subtle thread of logic that's in Frank's stuff, that in his mentality, that is relatable. Of like, what would I do? Like, how would I feel if all this stuff happened? And like, what if I had nothing left to lose? And like, what if I lived in this world where I could do X, Y, and Z to like drug dealers who are ruining other people's lives and killing other people? What would I do, with this like psychotic CIA guy who's trying to kill me in my platoon? Like, what would I do? I don't know. But the show was so real in the humanity in a lot of aspects that it almost was more unsettling than having like a Tarantino movie or something. Where it's just like, guys,
it's just egregious.
Yeah, it's just like, this is so obnoxious. It's like, and like, that's the point. And it's like gratuitous violence to just, they're not trying to be realistic. It's just gratuitous.
Yeah.
Whereas this was like,
I feel like the violence in this show is over the top, in some senses, but I don't think it's egregious. I don't think it's like, I don't think the violence is meant to be entertaining in certain aspects. I think it could be found entertaining, but I think it's meant to be unsettling. It's meant to draw questions to Frank's character, and like he's the product of war. He's the product of all of these things that have happened to him and his family dying. Like what will cause a human being to step over the line into using violence and killing and stuff to like to seek revenge? Like, I don't know. Like it's one of those things where you're like, I don't believe in violence. I don't believe in this thing. Like, I don't believe in doing these things. But at the same time, you're like, I've never been in war. I've never been trained in the way that somebody like that has been trained. I've never had my family killed by my best friend, like, or by the government or whatever. It's like, you don't really know how you feel. And I think it brings that level of humanity to it of like, I don't believe what he's doing is right, but frick, man, it's unsettling. Like, what if I was like that? What if we all were like that and we all had like, and that's kind of like the Killing Joke dilemma of like, all it takes is one bad day for somebody to turn into like the Joker or whatever. And it's like Frank still, I mean, he's crossed the line to killing. Like, what's to stop him from crossing the line and just becoming completely insane and being a bad guy? Like,
right.
How does, like, you can tell he has a line, but like, what would it take for him to cross that line then and stuff? So it's like, frick, dude.
Yeah. And I think it's an interesting dilemma that it's like, I can't recommend this show to everybody, especially if you're squeamish. Don't even try.
No.
But from the side of like, because of how gory it is in a lot of aspects, with the right perspective, I think it turns into a very fascinating case study and a very fascinating fictional, sometimes relatable, sometimes really unsettling. Not in a like, ooh, blood, but like, did he have to? Oh.
Yeah, it's like, did he take it a little too far?
Yeah, it's like, did he? But like, why? But he's this, and
yeah,
I could kind of justify it, but it's like there are moments where, you know, he's fighting some guys where I'm like, dude, you gotta come in, let's go. That's what you get. But there were other moments where there were guys where I was like, that guy looks scared, and it's like, whoa, like this show is about death, and it's about not just like, I'm the bringer of death, but it's you took people that I loved and were keeping me sane in a way. Like, that's kind of the thesis is like, I have nothing here anymore to keep me sane because that was taken from me.
Yep.
And it was taken from me by this group of people that is clearly evil. No one else will disagree with me. I'm going to do what needs to be done to put them down, put them away. Yep. And that to me it's like, morally, of course not, it's not right, but it is a very, very, very fascinating question. And I think, and maybe that's part of the intrigue too recently, or that added to the enjoyment of just like thinking really deeply about that question, is I know like, I've heard like Jordan Peterson talk about this, is how everyone's like, oh, you know, Nazis were so bad and they were so dumb. But the point being, like, they were just people that like systematically were broken down in small steps over time to the point where, yeah, I'll just do this horrible, terrible thing.
Yeah. It's like, what could cause a man to turn over, or what could cause a man to do things that would deem evil?
Yeah. And I think in a weird way, and I mean, like, I don't want to grandstand the show and say it's doing something noble, but I think in the right eyes with the right people behind it kind of promoting it, is I think it could be a show used as an example of asking a really hard question, which is like, what are you capable of doing? And are you willing to acknowledge that you're capable of doing that? And what is it going to take you to not do that, or to not become that? Yeah. And I
think that's what the show does in a really good way. I think it almost puts a mirror up to us and says, like, are you on board with what Frank is doing, or are you not? And it's kind of like, well, if you choose to be on board with him, like, how far can he take it before it's deemed bad or evil?
Yeah.
And if you're not on board with it, well, then what do you do about it? Like, how do you handle these type of, like, how do you reconcile the fact that the government did kill his family? Like, what does he do about that? Like, he's living in a broken system that's not going to give him any sort of redemption, so he's taking it in his own hands. And it's kind of like, it's almost like a mirror up to our society of like there's two ways of understanding the Punisher character, and some people are going to see it as like Frank is justified and like revenge,
the adrenaline
revenge
rush.
against our enemies,
Right.
And some people are going to look at it and say like, I feel for you, man, but I don't think you should be killing people.
Don't do that.
But
don't do that.
Maybe we're reading too much into it. Who
No,
knows?
I don't think so. I mean,
I think it's fun to talk about, and I think
Yeah.
like I think for me that's always the most interesting moral dilemma that superheroes have, because like I just keep coming back to the Batman one, like in the Dark Knight Returns comic by Frank Miller, like there's actually a scene where Batman's chasing the Joker and he can like see the Joker like actually killing people. And as the Joker kills people, he's counting down like, there's another person I let die because I refuse to kill the Joker. There's another person I let die because I refuse to kill the Joker. And it gets to this point where he's like, I've let hundreds of thousands of people die in this city because I refuse to kill one man. And you're like, well, at what point do you cross the line and decide to start killing people then? And I think that's brought over to the Punisher character of like, he's already made that choice and he's not going back. And then you see the effectiveness of that worldview. So
definitely. Yeah, and I think the reason too that it's important to talk about this is I know, especially like approaching it from like the Christian worldview, that I still love this character and I love this show, and I don't have any problem personally with like wrestling with it, because I do think these are really important questions to ask, because it's like, well, I have this worldview, or I do this, so like therefore I would never do or say this thing. It's like, do you know what you are? Like, as a human being, do you understand what other human beings have done to each other for like thousands of years? Like, they're pretty terrible, and I think it's important to allow ourselves like some kind of catharsis to like see that in fiction and be like, not good. Like, we don't want that. But then also to like add complexity to things, because I feel like you can take it. I mean, like, harkening back to our conversation like 3 or 4 hours ago about like balance and like being in the middle. I think there's a tendency for sides to get so polarized on a show that's like, violent or and that is edgy in certain respects, that's like trying to send a message. But like Tarantino and his movies, it's like there's a scene I saw someone analyze from Inglourious Bastards where it's a bunch of the German people like watching a bunch of violence take place on screen. It's like they're watching like an action movie and they're like, oh, and they're like clapping and laughing, and then like seconds later all the Americans come in and like gun them down, and the guy was analyzing how that whole moment is a depiction of cinema and American cinema.
The irony is that we're watching the Americans gun down the Germans, watching the violent
exactly
movie,
and so like the Germans are celebrating violence, but we're celebrating the violent murder of these Nazis and all this stuff. And then it's just like a train of like, and then you're in the viewership being like, yeah, I want them to die. Ooh. It's like, and I think with the Punisher, like that's one of those things is I did find myself rooting for like, that is an evil person who deserves it. But then it's like, ooh, but I'm being judgy now. Like, ooh, this is a good question. I like this. And
that scene at the end where he's like torturing him, I'm like, ooh, Frank's gonna get out of this.
Yeah, it's like, ooh, Frank's gonna get you.
Frank's gonna kill you.
Yeah, it's like, oh.
And I'm like, Frank, should I be rooting for death and murder and stuff? But like that's the point of the character.
Yeah, is to like make you question that. And I think there's a problem when we look at things, even with like superhero stuff. Like superhero stuff is pretty deep. And I think we do creative things a disservice when we just kind of camp them of like, too violent, stay completely away from, to this, stay completely away from. It's like, I totally agree that I'm not going to like buy into the fact of like, our system is broken, so I'm going to be a good person and go out and beat people to death. Like, no one, anyone who's in that frame of mind like has bigger issues and is probably being taken care of, and like, hey buddy, let's go talk.
Yeah.
But for the average Joe who is just watching a show and stuff like that, it's like, this is with the right mindset and with the right lens. I do think it's important to take something like this and to like be like, why am I reacting to this? Like, it is conflicting. And to your point too of the what are we supposed to be feeling and thinking and all this stuff is like, the show forces you to be in like 6 different camps. Like you're for Frank in that you're like, this dude had like his wife and kids, like just let the man live, like just leave him alone.
Yep.
But then you also have his, his response to that and the vigilante violence, and you're like, dude, I don't know if you need to be putting people on meat hooks and like gouging their eyes out. But then you're also like, yeah, but like if I think of what they did, like he's not just doing this, like they've done something extremely reprehensible. But then I'm now in the judge's chair, which is like what, Madani and Frank and some of the, the justice system are in, and they're judging them. But like, is Madani's way better because it's in the system, or like, what's the, like, how do you deal with this, and how do you navigate the complexity of that situation? I think I just don't think our culture as a whole, whether in like TV or in general, is adept at looking at complex stuff and like not making a like it's either left or right. What are you gonna do? And it's like, would I tell like a 13-year-old kid like, oh, you like The Punisher? Go watch the Netflix show. Probably not. I don't think a 13-year-old kid should be seeing like, people like blowing off and, getting shot through every which place. Yeah. But at the same time, like, I do think it's important that older people who can handle it take a self-assessment, man. Like, take a look at it. I think it's very interesting that everyone in the show is hell-bent on their ideology, and to see what that looks like when you have a number of people with a number of different agendas hell-bent on their own philosophy, how things should play
and how
out.
they all clash.
Yeah, and I just think it's very interesting seeing how all that stuff works.
Same.
But
yeah,
cool. Any other thoughts on it, or
I don't think so. I think that's it's a good show.
Pretty deep dive.
I think it's a good show, yeah.
Yeah.
It causes you to ask a lot of questions. For
sure.
I think I remember because I watched like the first 3 episodes, and I was like, this is going to be a show I need to just sit down and watch all the way through. So I didn't watch it for a long time. And then I went on a trip to, where did I go? I don't remember. It was like Texas or something for work. And I worked night shifts, so I was like, I got there on like a Wednesday, and I didn't work till like Friday night or something.
Oh,
and so I had a lot of time. So I was just like, I binge watched Altered Carbon, and then I was like, you know what? I need to finish Punisher. Like, I need to figure out what's going on with this show. And then I just binge watched it in like a day and a half, I think. And so like, after I was done watching it, I'm like, frick, man. Yeah, I don't even know. Whoa. Like, I don't even know how to process what I just watched.
Yeah, really.
So like, there's just so much stuff packed in there that some necessary, some unnecessary, and it's just like, I think it's a good show. I think like Netflix seems to know what they're doing, at least on the Daredevil Punisher front. I haven't watched any of the other shows, so yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I have heard Luke Cage. I mean, Chris was the one who said to check out Luke Cage, so I might
need to
go
watch that. Yeah.
Yeah, I might go and check that out.
I've heard Jessica Jones season 1 is good too. I don't know about season 2 yet. But.
Yeah, I've heard mixed reviews on it for different reasons, but David Tennant I think plays the main villain, so I'm kind of like, ooh, I would see a David Tennant villain. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, more or less, like, really our discussion was more, we both love the Punisher and like the character, and then when, a show got announced, especially from Netflix after the Daredevil success, it was like,
yeah.
But
I just remember that first teaser where it just showed the Punisher skull, and I was like, this is really happening.
Yeah.
Oh, snap.
Definitely.
Let's go.
Yeah, so I think for me, where I really wanted to talk about this was just to encourage people. I mean, we've kind of said this as one of our goals for the podcast is just helping people, just encouraging people to engage with pop culture on a deep level and to like enjoy everything, like enjoy stuff, but also like some of the fun is thinking critically about it. And like some of it, I'm not going to do a critical analysis on, the mental implications of Pokemon. Like I'm sure you could. I'm not going to.
I could go into the philosophy of Trubbish again if you want.
I remember all too well.
All too well.
But yeah, just how I think it's important to not just write stuff off, either in consuming it and then writing off whatever happened in it, or to not consume it and write it off completely.
Yeah.
And I think if you do watch something or engage in something, like, ask some good questions. Think of questions this show asked, like, what am I supposed to feel? Did I feel sick and gross? Does that mean I should feel bad watching this? Like, maybe you should, for certain things, like cars, name Chase, and, romantic relationships. HCHC, shout out.
Shout out.
But,
yeah.
But, things like that where it's like, you know, I don't know. We need to bring more discussion to things in general as a culture. And I feel like for us being in the pop culture zone, this was just a show that we loved and really enjoyed, but also we're like, man, there's like some really heavy,
there's some heavy stuff
really
in
heavy,
there.
serious implications and stuff. That
Probably a
it
lot more that
tackles.
we missed too.
Oh,
I'm gonna have
yeah.
to watch it again.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to take a good while and just.
Oh yeah, you got. I might watch Daredevil again because I haven't
Yeah.
seen that in a long time.
For sure.
So
Yeah. No, it was more just like, I don't know if I can.
if I can handle it.
Oh
yeah.
gosh, I don't know if I can handle it. That
Yeah.
last episode was pretty gnarly.
Yeah, I remember watching that last episode and I was
Oh,
like, okay,
you're like, wow.
that's where I thought the show was going.
Yeah.
Yep.
He's like, oh, poor Billy.
Yeah.
You're like, but actually not because
Yeah.
you're horrible.
Yeah.
But
So
Ooh.
it's gonna be interesting to see what they do in season 2. I think.
Definitely. Have they given a estimated release date?
I don't
I
think
would
so.
assume probably not till
But
like
there-
maybe next
I've seen
year.
pictures of it being filmed, so
Yeah, so they're
it's
probably
confirmed that
cranking
it's
away.
happening.
Yeah.
I think they have to release Daredevil season 3 first.
Oh.
I don't know if they're going to be interconnected again.
Yeah.
But I think they have a certain timeline because they're doing like
Right. That makes sense.
all of them and then Defenders movies. It's kind of like a mini MCU. So
I actually really like that. I hope that they do more things like that. That'd be pretty cool.
I kind of want to go back and just watch all of the shows and just see how the Defenders ties up because there is a season 1 of Defenders with like Luke Cage, Jessica Jones,
Yeah,
Iron Fist, and Daredevil.
Yeah.
I don't think Punisher's in that.
I thought he
I would be-
was. I want
I
to
would
say
be
they
interested to
fought
see
him or
how
something.
like the Punisher would work in a group dynamic. It's like basically Deadpool trying to work with the X-Men. Like they
Yeah.
just don't jive.
It's just like you just
like please
you
don't
can't
kill
do it.
anybody.
Yeah, it's like no promises.
We don't kill people around here.
Yeah.
So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where they keep moving.
For
with
sure.
it. Hopefully it continues to get better.
Yeah. So definitely check out the shows if you're into like edgier superhero stuff, but also like gore be warned. Even
Gore
like,
be warned.
even Daredevil, like man, the Kingpin door scene was
I liked that scene to be honest.
I mean,
it was
it's
brutal,
intense.
but I think it's just. I feel like Vincent D'Onofrio, the actor, was like the perfect actor for
he
that.
did
I was like,
so well
because he always plays like the off kind of dude, and like he used to be in Criminal Intent, like a Law and Order CI, and he was one of the detectives, and he always had like this just edge where like he was about to snap and like beat the crap out of this like pedophile.
Oh
or
my
whatever.
gosh, that's that guy.
Yeah.
How did
Law
I
and
not
Order
make
CI,
that connection? Whoa.
And so like he
That's-
kind of always plays this guy who's got like he's like normal, but he's got like a tick, and like Fisk is basically like him, but
Yeah.
like he went off the chain.
Dude, I totally did make. I was like, he looks so familiar. I just couldn't.
yeah.
That makes sense now.
So-
No, I used to. I love just being like, I'm Whistling Fisk. Vanessa, let's go to the art gallery. It's very important that you come with me now. It's just like he's just kind of like all over the place, and he's like
Yeah.
very hitched in how he talks. It's
Yeah.
just like this city of Hell's Kitchen is the worst place ever to live. It freaking sucks. But
Yeah,
no,
I really liked his character.
Yeah.
So
But
I think
I mean,
he's coming
same deal.
back in season 3 somehow.
Yeah, because Punisher got him out, didn't he? Season
Something
2
like that.
Daredevil.
Gosh, man.
But at the same time, like I love the theme that these two shows have woven, which is like, because I mean, in the same way, it's like everyone that is a major component in all of those shows is the product of some kind of tragedy and how they address it.
Yeah.
You know, like even, I mean, Matt, it's like his dad was murdered, and so like he's the product of that. And what the frick is her name? Electra. I can't remember what her actual name is.
Her actual name is.
You know, but she's the product of like all her stuff, and then growing, you know, being trained and grown up around Stick and his, you know, his whole thing. And then even like Ellen Page, I think the only person who wasn't super deep was like Foggy. I didn't like Foggy's actor. It's
Yeah,
kinda,
that's kind of weird. Yeah, like
what are we
Karen Page,
gonna
you mean?
do,
Karen?
Matt? Oh yeah, what did I say?
Karen. Ellen.
Ellen Page. Oh, wrong page. Yeah, Karen Page, and like even her, it's like, you know, people trying to murder her, and yeah, it's a show that is very dark and like not just like the Batman like brooding, but literally,
I think
like,
it's just visceral. It's just like
It's extremes.
It's like there's no trying to save the world. There's no trying to save the galaxy. It's just like literally trying to survive and save Hell's Kitchen from burning down, basically.
Yeah, and I really dig that. I think
it
that's
makes
just
it feel
such a
more
cool,
real, more human, more relatable. Because like, ain't nobody gonna be Iron Man. Ain't nobody gonna be Thor because he's a god. So like, it's more grounded. Granted, Daredevil's blind and he can like run through the streets and do acrobatics and see through sound and stuff. So it's like, but but it's still like his tactics are just like very real and like on the ground.
But even for him, like he is actually trying to live the normal life and keep all this stuff a secret and not letting Foggy know. And like even Karen doesn't know until much later. And then, you know, what happens when all that stuff kind of collides and, you know, he has to actually make choices and he's struggling with stuff. And it like, there's just complexity to it. And it's not just mindless violence and it's not just gratuitous mindless violence for entertainment's, you know, quote unquote entertainment's sake. It's like, this is it's the irony is it's Hell's Kitchen. It's a horrible place. It's terrible. People die constantly. So what are the people who are the products of this city going to do to stop it and to change it? And ironically enough, you end up with Daredevil, who's a superhuman guy who beats the snot out of everybody to the point of like, you're not dead, but you're pretty close. You shouldn't be messing around and doing stuff anymore.
Let this be a lesson.
Yeah, exactly. Like broken nose, couple ribs, finger, like knock it off. And then you have Frank Castle who's like bullet. So it's
it's good stuff.
I dig it. I always love complex things like that.
Oh, yeah.
But
faux show.
We're gonna wrap it up with some notes. You can check us out on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. You can also follow us on Twitter at
Pop Culture Punks,
at Six Wing Creative, which is me. I do some freelance creative stuff, so if you need anything, let me know. You can DM me, you can retweet me, whatever. You got I am Phil Sorensen and C Sam Pellegrino, who is that boy Young Zach.
That boy Young Zach.
Yeah. So you can follow us on Twitter. Hit us up with some thoughts. We'd love to hear any additional things you had that you loved or didn't love about Daredevil over the Punisher. We had a lot of fun thinking through this episode and just like mulling over. We did a lot of mulling even before it.
Yeah, we did
like, whoa.
Like an hour and a half's worth of mulling.
So technically this could have been like a 3-hour episode.
Yeah.
But that's a whole side thing. Thanks for tuning in. Have fun.
Just have fun. Just enjoy
have
stuff.
Fun.
But also ask a lot of questions.
Be inquisitive.
Yeah.
Always be learning.
And if you want to talk about stuff, hit us up because we love talking about it.
We love chatting.
Yeah.
So we'll catch y'all on the flippity flip.
Peace out.
Job security, but I've been dreaming about packing it all up, cause the war in me just won't relent till there's nothing left but dust. So what do you do when the walls start closing in and everyone you love tells you it's all just in your head?